This is it. After a very entertaining and exciting postseason, it is time to see who will etch their names in NBA history alongside all the NBA greats who have won titles the past 77 years and earned the coveted jewelry, respect, and bragging rights that come with being an NBA champion. Will the OKC Thunder finally bring the first championship of their post-Sonics rebrand? Or will the Indiana Pacers earn their first championship ever in franchise history? No matter who wins, we will all be witnessing history, and we are certainly in for an intense and electrifying series. I'm here to talk all things Indy and OKC, plus give a preview of what we can expect from this matchup and more, so definitely get your popcorn ready as we are set to dive deep into this year's NBA Championship Series right now on H2DG. Welcome to Hip to the Games, the podcast for you, the basketball junkie and the hip-hop head. I'm your host, Desmond, and I too have had hoop dreams and enjoy the beautiful genre of hip-hop and its history. Together, we will enjoy some of the greatest albums, songs, artists, players, moments, teams, and so much more, while even mixing the two on occasion, all in my hope that you remember why you love both or either of these to begin with. You'll soon understand that Hip to the Games is more than just a podcast, it's a lifestyle. And if you were looking for a platform that combines both basketball and hip-hop, you've come to the right place. They play my kind of basketball. A lot of layers to this song if you're really paying attention. Here's a huge shout out to you for being hip to the games. Welcome to this episode of Hip to the Games. Shout out to you if you are a loyal listener and are showing that you are indeed hip to the games by listening or tuning in visually for another episode. Whether you are listening on your favorite platform or watching on YouTube, I sincerely thank you for all your support. And if you do happen to be new to H2DG, welcome. I am happy to have you on board and a part of the H2DG family. If throughout this episode you like what you're hearing, be sure to hit that subscribe button or that follow button on whatever platform you're listening to or watching on to stay tapped in with all things hip to the games. And before we really get into today's episode, you already know the drill. I gotta get my pregame shoutouts out the way. The first one always goes to the creative director, Jesus Christ, for another H2DG episode, as it's always a blessing to get in front of this microphone and do what he's placed in my heart to do. And the second one goes to my 19 Media Group family, all right, for the opportunity to represent the home team. You always see that blue and white logo sitting in the corner. I think it's this corner. So you always see that logo in the corner of every video, and that's my home squad. And it's always a privilege to get in front of this microphone and represent them as well. Be sure to follow 19M Group on Twitter, 19 Media Group on Instagram, 19 Media Group on YouTube to follow everything going on with the network. All right, not just the H2DG stuff, but we really have a variety of shows around sports, music, culture, education. And they're just hosted by some passionate independent podcasters and teammates of mine. And I'm sure you can find another one to support, whether it's through likes, comments, reposts, listens, buying merch. Any kind of that support is seen and felt and appreciated. And I know I can speak for 19 when I say that. Now, as we get into today's show, given it's really only one topic to discuss today, there's two teams left in the NBA playoffs, I'm going to ditch the format that pays homage to the classic hip-hop song structure. All right, it's the NBA Finals, so this is going to be a lot more like Black Thought's Funk Flex freestyle. But real quick, with an NBA champion waiting to be crowned, here's how you can win like a champion with H2DG's latest sponsor. The NBA and NHL playoffs are here, and the action is heating up on Prize Picks, the best place to cash in on your favorite sports. Don't miss your last chance to add your favorite players from the court and the ice to your Prize Picks lineup. Whether it's points, rebounds, assists, goals, points, or hits, take your pick of more or less for your shot to win up to 2,000 times your cash today by using the promo code CLNS. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is going to look to set the tone for the finals, so once again, I'll be picking him for more than 30 points. And lately, I've been trying to lock in picks that I know will help me win. So usually I lock in TJ McConnell or Pascal Siakam for more than 2.5 assists as they thrive in that drive and kick offense. Now, Prize Picks also offers weekly promotions that can lead to big payouts and is available in more than 30 states, including California, Texas, Georgia, and Florida. Prize Picks is truly the best way to win real money with all the various opportunities to play and collect your winnings. This includes the opportunity to turn your playoff hot takes into tickets to basketball's championship series. Starting with the play-in round, every lineup you make on Prize Picks will enter you in the Takes Two ticket sweepstakes, which could get you and a +1 a VIP trip to the ship. Additionally, be on the lookout for Taco Tuesdays, which means every Tuesday Prize Picks will discount several projections on the board, usually by 15 to 25%, and this Friday is Flex Friday, so make sure you opt in and tap the checkbox in your lineup builder to be eligible for the protected play. Choose squares from any game on the board. If your lineup doesn't win, you still can get your net losses back in promo funds up to your promo limit as soon as the lineup settles. If you love a quick win, Prize Picks is the way to go. You can make your picks and submit your entry in less than 60 seconds. So what are you waiting for? Download the app today and use code CLNS to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup and win up to 2,000 times your cash today. Remember, with Prize Picks, it's as simple as picking more or picking less. And again, that's promo code CLNS. Hip to the Games is rocking with Prize Picks, and you should too. Prize Picks is the best place to win cash while watching sports. Join millions of users and sign up today. Prize Picks, run your game. I wanted to tip today's episode off with the basics. Just on the surface, I wanted to briefly, or maybe not so briefly, you know how I get, but I wanted to talk about the fact that we have a OKC Thunder versus Indiana Pacers NBA Finals, because within the last month or so, there's been a lot of talk about whether or not this is the NBA Finals people wanted to see. And you got people saying there's no aura with this matchup. Nobody wants to see foul baiting Shai or the lucky Pacers in the finals. And I'm just like, what? What are we talking about? Nobody wants to see the best team in the league with the league MVP in the finals? Nobody wants to see how a high-octane Pacers team plays against such a great defense that the OKC Thunder have? These have literally been the two best teams all postseason, and record-wise have been the two best teams since January 1st. Who doesn't want to watch that? Even for me, as much as I would have loved to see Anthony Edwards on this stage, as much as I was rooting for those gritty New York Knicks to be right here, in the back of my mind, I just knew it was going to be OKC and Indy. OKC's the best team in the league. Indy has had such a Disney-esque playoff run with all the comebacks and game winners and clutch shots. I mean, it was only right. Two small market teams with incredible home crowds and amazing young stars. Since 2020, we've seen some unpredictable finals matchups. You know, people didn't expect to see a 5th seed Miami Heat team make it in 2020. You know, 2021, it was cool when it was Suns and Bucks. But I mean, for me, you know, because of KD's shoe size and, you know, Kawhi's injury, we didn't get what I believe was destined to be a Clippers versus Nets NBA Finals that year. You know, 2023, when it was Nuggets and Heat, you know, the Heat climbed all the way from the play-in, you know, to another finals appearance. And again, a lot of people have been referencing that finals like, yo, this is going to be another finals where it's just whack. And I'm like, no. You know, point being, I just think this decade of NBA hoops has given us a lot of interesting matchups that we likely wouldn't have seen 10 to 15 years ago. And again, myself included, you got to remember there was a time where a lot of us were complaining, as great as a lot of those series were, it was getting a little annoying to watch Warriors and Cavs every single year. So now that we're getting different matchups, now folks want to complain. You know, I just don't understand that. And I think on a deeper level, though, this is where I think a lot of this thought process comes from. Think about it. My generation, all right, specifically the Gen Z elders, right? We aren't necessarily used to the younger, more exciting teams winning and making it far in the playoffs. I think the free-flowing style of today's NBA and really the way the NBA has deviated from the super team thing where super teams don't carry the weight that they once did. I think all of that has allowed contenders that don't necessarily look the part to find success. You know, when we were growing up, it was rare to see the heavyweights get booted. I think of how close the 2009 Bulls were to defeating the defending champs in the opening round. That same postseason, while not as young as the Bulls, right? I think of how close the Houston Rockets were to beating Kobe's Lakers in the semifinals. And that was without T-Mac and Yao Ming. I can't help but envision the possibility of those upsets being successful if the game was played like how it is today. Because what we see today is more of what we saw from the 2007 Cavs, the 2009 Orlando Magic, the 2012 OKC Thunder. Those teams pop off my head instantly. You know, LeBron at just 22 years old found a way to essentially single-handedly overcome the gritty Detroit Pistons and led his guys to go against the dynasty that the San Antonio Spurs were. But of course, he got swept, right? The Magic surrounded a 23-year-old Dwight Howard with shooters, which was unique at that time. And they found a way to come out of an Eastern Conference that featured a 66-16 Cleveland Cavaliers team and a 62-20 Boston Celtics team. But of course, they only got one game versus the Lakers in the finals. And then never forget the iconic Game 6 the OKC Thunder had versus the San Antonio Spurs in 2012, where they had to come back from as many as 18 to advance to the finals. Even then, the Thunder had 2 prior playoff runs where they took L's from the eventual champion Lakers in 2010 and the eventual champion Mavs in 2011. So even as young as they were, they had gotten some experience that some veterans don't even get, right? When you take those 2 playoff runs and then that hard-fought Game 6 versus a great team that the Spurs were, at even though Russ and them, you know, Russ, KD, they're like 22, 23 years old, you know, Harden 20, 21 years old, like they had already been through some stuff that would age you in NBA years. Right? And then still, even after winning Game 1 versus the Miami Heat, that NBA Finals, they lost the next 4 games. NBA history traditionally just isn't in favor of the younger stars and teams. You know, obviously there are some exceptions, right? You look at 2006 with the Heat, they had a nice amount of vets. But D Wade, you know, at 24 years old was able to get that. He was able to get that title. You know, but the Spurs, you know, they had experienced vets. They were always in championship conversations. The Celtics Big Three, they had plenty of experience collectively. The Lakers, they were a more mature team that leaned on Phil Jackson, Kobe, and like Derek Fisher's leadership, right? The Big Three Heat, they had plenty of experience as a collective. That said, though, you know, you think about the Warriors in 2015, you know, they were a lot like what we're seeing now from the Thunder and the Pacers. They had a young Big Three, but also had a lot of veteran role players, you know, Maurice Spates, Leandro Barbosa, you know, players like that. There were a lot of good veteran role players to balance out the youth that the Warriors had. That's the point that I'm trying to make. Until that Warriors dynasty, we just didn't really see the exciting teams win. You know, Dirk had some really good teams, but Dirk took some rough L's. It took his team a long time to win. As good as Steve Nash and the Phoenix Suns were, they never won. The Lob City Clippers at times seemed destined to win at some point, and for various reasons, they just never got close. After 2012, the year they made the finals, OKC lost Harden. Russ eventually got hurt in the playoff run when Pat Bev ran into his knee. KD broke his foot in 2015, and they eventually blew a 3-1 lead in the conference finals in 2016. They just never made it back. More often than not, the teams with discipline and balance are the ones that win games and win, really make the NBA finals. So I understand, I bring all that up to say I understand why some might think the Pacers don't deserve to be here. It don't make sense. You know, I understand why seeing an OKC team that still feels so young, it might look weird at first glance. You know, if you look at this NBA finals, there are no veteran soon-to-be Hall of Famers trying to add to their resume here. You know, dramatically. Like, if we're thinking of it in the kind of dramatic fashion we always seen it growing up. Nobody's legacy seems to be on the line, right? There's no high-stakes pressure here, right? There's nobody with the Jordan, Kobe, LeBron type of global face of the league. Everybody knows who I am. Superstardom. Like, your grandma doesn't even watch basketball, and she knows who LeBron is. That type of figure. You know, there's nobody in this series like a Tim Duncan who had 3 rings before he turned 30, right? Like a legend in the making, you know, and again, this isn't to diss guys like Shai and Tyrese. I absolutely think they're legends in the making, but you know, like there's nobody even like Dirk, right? Somebody who we've watched for try and fail for 10 years before finally getting his only title. This is only Shai Gilgeous-Alexander's second playoff run as the star that we see him as today. This is only Tyrese Haliburton's second playoff run in general, right? I get it. It looks weird to see these guys at center stage like this. But welcome to the new NBA. We knew the league was getting younger, and now people are suddenly surprised when younger teams, even small market teams who have built through the draft, have built their rosters to reach the NBA Finals in what feels like historic time. Remember what I said in my last episode. Don't miss out on the beauty of the present by comparing it to the past. Like I said, we did not get these kind of matchups growing up. Imagine if we were able to see Carmelo's Nuggets make it in 2009 and Bron was able to overcome Orlando and we got Bron versus Melo in the 2009 Finals. How exciting that would have been. How exciting the Chicago Bulls and the OKC Thunder would have been in 2012, say D-Rose didn't get hurt, right? Or even if you look to 2018, where that up-and-coming Celtics team, that new-look Celtics team, had they been able to face the Houston Rockets at James Harden's peak, right? If they were able to overcome the Warriors. Like, we missed out on these kind of matchups. So enjoy these talented players and mature leaders like Shai Gilgeous-Alexander and Tyrese Haliburton having this opportunity so young, because we did not see that coming up. To say that this is the NBA Finals, that the NBA didn't want or that it's going to be the worst one in years, to me is just a false, asinine take. Like, this is the finals real basketball fans and NBA fans will appreciate, and I wholeheartedly believe it's going to deliver and close what has already been an amazing postseason. We're definitely going to get into the actual game stuff itself, believe me, but I had to address the Oscar Mayer out here and let these folks know that they are being blinded by the beauty of this finals matchup by focusing on the wrong thing. All right. Next up, I'll be talking all things Pacers and Thunder, Indy's strengths, OKC's strengths, Shai's leadership, Tyrese's skill set, and much more before hearing my keys to the game for each team and my finals prediction. But before all that, if you're enjoying Hip to the Games, here's how you can show some love to the podcast. As a fan of Hip to the Games, not only should you show your love for the podcast, but you gotta express your love for basketball and hip hop. With a wide variety of clothing and accessories, there is always a way to show how much the game of basketball and the game of rap means to you. Let everybody know what it means to be hip to the games by clicking the link in the episode's description to cop some merch and represent the H2DG lifestyle. Welcome back to Hip to the Games, and now we can get into the fun part, right? What actually matters. The fact that the two best teams are ready to battle for the Larry. Now, I'll admit, I had concerns about both of these teams at some point. Despite the Thunder being my pick to come out the West before the season started, I still had some doubts that their surrounding pieces would be able to contribute offensively, especially in off-the-dribble situations. But to my surprise, guys like Cason Wallace, has shown to hit a couple bailout close-range jumpers. I didn't think he had that in him. Right. Similarly, Alex Caruso has shown to hit some floaters in the close range, some little one dribble pull-ups in the lane when left open, maybe in a late shot clock situation. Even a guy like Kenrich Williams has gotten some short bursts of minutes and found a way to sneak some points on the board in OKC's favor. And while my opinion hasn't totally changed, I've definitely been pleased to see how these guys have found a way to contribute offensively. Likewise, I felt that Indiana was not as confident in their half-court game despite the offensive skill set Pascal Siakam presents in the post, in the mid-range area. And, the way Tyrese Haliburton can shoot from 30 feet. And even while rare, a guy like Miles Turner can score on the block. He shoots a lot of face-up jumpers. He's out in the three-point line, but he can score on the block when you give it to him. And even with those talents, I just feared it would be easy to jam up those role players and force a bad shot, which we have seen flashes of in the Pacers' last two series. Nonetheless, both of these teams have stuck to what works for them, no matter how it varies on a night-to-night basis, and it has paid off. Now, last episode, I gave my flowers to Indiana. In this episode, I wanted to show some love to OKC for a historic season. I realized, man, I was so, I think it was, I got caught up in the whole, OKC's the best team, so they don't need their flowers. Let's focus on some of the other things. But then it dawned on me, man, I just really haven't shown them their proper love. Even for them to be my preseason pick, I just haven't shown them their love in quite a while. So first off, I just wanted to say I love how Shai Gilgeous-Alexander has set the tone for this group. it's clear as day. Shai is a bit of an old soul. Me and him are the same age. And again, I think he's one of the few guys, in this crop of young stars that genuinely follows a lot of the old school values and principles. That's why I'm a fan of his, because he sees the value in it. And lo and behold, here he is, arguably the best player in the league, right? He lets his teammates enjoy their success, but he's also the same guy that keeps them level-headed, reminding them that their job ain't done yet. He rarely looks rattled, and even when they get their butt kicked, he understands it's an opportunity to learn from the mistakes, handle adversity, and bounce back. And the other thing I'll say about Shai is that, yes, you can tell he studied a guy like Kobe Bryant based on his skill set, right? The mid-range arsenal, the pivot work. It's all there, but it's also his demeanor. I know people get carried away when it comes to comparisons, but when I was watching the conference finals, it dawned on me. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is probably what Kobe Bryant would have looked like if he had the wisdom of his 32-year-old self at 24. Mind you, Kobe already came into the league a lot more mature than his peers, and even some of his veterans. But he went through his stages of being known to take the highlight over the right play, right? The tougher shot instead of the extra pass. And his brash personality didn't help his case as a leader when he was younger. But from 2008 to 2010, we saw Kobe grow much more understanding of his teammates and realized he could keep his intense motivational tactics, but now blend those with his empathy for his teammates' individual personalities and their life journeys, something he didn't bother to care about in his younger days. And this is exactly what I meant when 2 seasons ago, if you remember, I mentioned that Paolo Banchero had such an impressive rookie season because we are officially in the era where guys have benefited from YouTube. These young stars are a part of the generation who always had their phones, always had access to watch their favorite players and study every bit of them. And call me crazy, but I feel like that's genuinely what Shai Gilgeous-Alexander has done, because that's how I thought about it myself. Okay, what did Kobe learn at 32 that I can learn at 26? How can I learn from what he did well, but adjust what he didn't do so well? I'm as competitive as Kobe, but I'm a nice, chill guy. I don't really like, yelling at folks or getting down on my teammates. I want to uplift them a little more. How can I use that difference in our personality to my and my teammates' benefit? This is what Kobe looked like in an NBA that was more physical and less spaced out. What would he have done in this era where there's more space, where there's more pick and roll opportunities? Would he take more threes or treat it like a haymaker in boxing? Because I was watching the games like, man, you forget that Shai is a very respectable three-point shooter because he looks for the mid-range so much. Shai has clearly done his homework. He gets it. That's why he's the MVP and a part of one of the best teams historically. I totally get why the youngins, if you pay attention, the youngins love Shai. And I think that's why they want him to be the face of the league so bad, because his answers to the media are mature. He's great on the court. He's merged the old school mid-range game with the modern-esque dribbles, change of pace, and layup packages, right? He can lay up off the wrong foot. He can scoop it. He can take a different angle, throw the defense off, all those flashy things. And contrary to popular belief, Shai understands that great scorers know how to get to the free throw line. Yeah, I had to talk about it. I know it's a hot topic now, but throughout NBA history, the guys that got to the free throw line the most were either the most aggressive or the most savvy. And I acknowledge, sometimes it does look ugly. Sometimes it can get annoying to watch. Sometimes Shai will get a call that he probably shouldn't have gotten. But make no mistake, his change of pace, the fact that you have to honor his mid-range accuracy is why so many guys fall for his pump fakes in the first place. You have to honor that if you play too soft, he'll just push off your momentum and hit that step back J, or if you play too tight, he'll take you with him. It's an and one. The pump fakes that we see are no different than what we saw from D Wade and Kobe. If you watched D Wade, Kobe Bryant, even Michael Jordan growing up, you shouldn't be complaining. The use of Shai Gilgeous-Alexander's off arm is not much different than what we've seen prime James Harden do. The average fan doesn't realize how hard it can be to catch those movements in real time if you're a referee, especially knowing that they're at specific spots on assignment on the floor. I said it on my YouTube channel. There were always tricks to the trade. Nowadays, we have the luxury of slow motion replay, so you can see when a guy, hooks an arm or whatever. They said back in the day, Tim Duncan, DeMarcus Cousins said, even old Tim Duncan, his trick to the trade was always, I'm going to pull you down with my off arm and go up for the block, right? It wasn't all the slow-mo replay and all the dissecting and the snitching, if I'm being honest, the snitching that's going on now. It wasn't like that back in the day. This is nothing new. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is a high-usage scorer. It comes a point where you don't want to drop 30 points on 30 shots every night. If you plan on playing 82 games, you think you wanted to take 30 shots to get 30 points just because you feel you want to play to a certain preference? And mind you, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander does not play off ball. So he's not getting pin downs for catch and shoot middies. He's not getting backdoor cuts for easy layups. And he's not always the one getting the bucket in transition because his other teammates are so good defensively. Add in the fact that he's facing zones, traps, doubles, even three bodies at a time. He knows he's got to get to the line to still get the 30 points his team benefits from while conserving his energy in the process. And it results in the more efficient 30-point games we see from him. I understand at times for some it can be annoying to watch. I get it. But me personally, I can't knock the hustle. Because the reality is, while Shai is a part of the business, that entertainment side of the NBA, he does not play this game of basketball to satisfy your preference of how he scores. I had to give my take on the foul baiting situation because I think it's just getting a little crazy. We're acting like we didn't see great scorers get to the free throw line. Like, I know a lot of people, around my age have been saying it. Like, if you're complaining about Shai right now, you would have hated D Wade back in the day. And even then, like, I remember watching D Wade and like, what had me is that he was so electrifying getting to the rim, and he eventually developed that pump fake. I wasn't even thinking about foul merchant, foul baiter, whatever, all these terms. Like, sure, was every call a legit foul? You could debate that, but for the most part, he was aggressive. He was always at the rim. He was more likely to get touched up. But I digress. Additionally, what makes OKC scary is the fact that they have two all-star caliber players alongside the MVP in Jalen Williams and Chet Holmgren. Even scarier to think that Chet Holmgren hasn't even reached the level of what he was drafted to become yet. J-Dub is special because he's a strong small forward who is able to play the small ball 4 and even plays the small ball 5 at times and holds his own. He's an all-NBA defender. He has a great knack to turn defense into offense. And while we gush over Shai's ability to score in the mid-range, J-Dub has a similar skill set as well. He often uses snatchbacks and behind-the-back moves to create space for his shot and can find his way into the close-range area and hit different drifters and fades. Like, that's really impressed me over the last year or so. He just knows how to make the right plays on both ends of the floor. Some games J-Dub is an energy guy. Other games he's the D-Wade to Shai's LeBron, which is the role I think J-Dub performs at his best. An aggressive Jalen Williams, like we saw in Game 4 versus Minnesota, is the version of him that really takes OKC over the top. Same thing with Chet. He's not necessarily a post-up player, nor is he an isolation guy. Shai said it himself. They don't really run plays for Chet. Imagine, they don't run plays for second pick overall Chet Holmgren, but Chet's ability to find his place in a game, whether that means focusing on being a rim protector or using his small forward-esque skill set to step up his aggressiveness offensively, that's what makes him somebody to worry about, especially because they don't run sets for him. Great plug-and-play player. The fact that this big three is so young, so talented, OKC just has so much room to nurture this core and even adjust it if they ever feel the need to. Like, this truly puts OKC in a position to potentially be that next dynasty we see in the league. I know there's a lot of talk of like, oh, there's so much parity in the league. We're never going to see anybody repeat as champions. We're never going to see another dynasty because there's so much parity. And in some ways I agree, but I really think what OKC has right now and how much they're able to work with and the growth that still is yet to be had from even their best players, They might very well be the next dynasty, and Shai Gilgeous-Alexander might very well be that next kind of, Stephen Curry, Kobe Bryant, Tim Duncan-esque figure where it's like multi-champion, all the All-Stars, a couple MVPs, the whole nine. So OKC's in a dope spot. As long as you have those three guys with hungry, selfless defenders, scrappy rebounding, and contributors like Alex Caruso, Cason Wallace, Lou Dort, Isaiah Hartenstein, Aaron Wiggins, Isaiah Joe, Jaylin Williams, right? OKC can hoop at this level for a long time, as long as they stay healthy. Now, on the Pacers side of things, this has been a team that you have to compete with for 48 minutes. They play fast, they move the ball, and play with high energy. And a big reason they can play high energy is because they use all of their rotation. Again, depth is everything in this NBA. The two teams in the finals right now are living proof of that. They have done away with the traditional 8 or 9-man playoff rotation and said, no, we have 10 or 11 guys that can contribute. So just when you think you've seen everybody who's going to play, here comes Kenrich Williams to score 4 quick buckets to cap off a 10-0 run and force you to use a timeout, right? Because now it's like, well, shoot, just when we couldn't stop Shai, J-Dub, Chet, here comes what seems like a random guy off the bench, another guy that I don't even know how to game plan for because he just came in and gave impact minutes. Or even for Indy, right? Let's sneak in Tony Bradley after a TV timeout to get us a couple extra rebounds, that'll give us extra possessions in the last 2 minutes of the second quarter, right? And that's not even mentioning how a guy like TJ McConnell pushes the tempo, how Aaron Nesmith is a really good 3-and-D player, how Ben Mathurin can drive to the hoop when he's aggressive, or how Obi Toppin is the perfect transition player for a guy like Tyrese Haliburton. The Pacers are a collective of selfless, high-energy dudes that don't care how they contribute as long as it ends in a win. But of course, it starts with their star guard, Tyrese Haliburton, who's had an amazing playoff run. He's been as clutch as I've seen anyone be. He can get after it on defense when he's locked in on that end. And I think, obviously it's the dimes, man. He can drop 15 dimes with 0 turnovers. It's really funny. Marcus Morris went viral that morning of Tyrese's historic Game 4 triple-double, comparing Tyrese to future Hall of Famer Chris Paul. And at first I was like, okay, let's chill for a second, pump your brakes. Let's not forget Chris Paul was doing what he was doing as a floor general while being one of the best on-ball defenders at the point guard position in NBA history. Also being one of the best pickpockets in NBA history. Tyrese is balling, but he ain't no CP3, right? But then I thought, well, Tyrese has shown to have 0 turnover games like Chris Paul. He's helped teams get to the conference finals like Chris Paul. He's made it to the finals much sooner than Chris did. He's just as clutch. He does have a small sample size of potentially being able to develop that mid-range game that Chris Paul developed. The similarities are certainly there. In fact, I would even go as far as saying this. Tyrese Haliburton reminds me of Magic Johnson, off the simple fact of why play slow when we can run teams out the gym. Let's not forget how Magic changed the NBA game by leading an up-tempo team to multiple championships. That was the critique back in the day. Just like we say now, how does a slow team win games? Back then, they were saying, how does a fast team win games? Similarly, we've watched the Indiana Pacers beat teams with a transition-heavy style of play in an environment where it didn't seem like it could work long-term. Coach Carlisle has made it work for Indy, and Mark Daigneault has been a genius for OKC's defense-first identity. This year's finals is a match made in heaven. I've certainly set the scene for this matchup here on H2DG, but now it's time to get into the nitty-gritty of the series. I'm going to take a quick break first, but get ready to get into the matchups, trends, strengths, weaknesses for both teams next on Hip to the Games. What's up, what's up? I'm Desmond, and I'm the host and creator of Hip to the Games, a podcast from 19 Media Group. From hot topics across the NBA, how can you say we done with the 80s or we done with the 90s, yet that's who we learned from? To album reviews and song breakdowns and everything in between, I take immense pride in genuinely appreciating the brilliance of basketball and hip-hop's past and present. If you too love the game of basketball and the game of rap, that means you're hip to the games. But no matter where you fall on that spectrum, I'm sure you'll find your place in the H2DG family, and I encourage you to join the fun. He has a little more knuck if you buck, if you will. Every other Friday on your favorite podcast platform or YouTube, courtesy of the home team, 19 Media Group. So how will these two teams fare against each other? Well, I expect Indiana to run the anybody but Shai defensive strategy that most teams have been running this postseason, right? And what scares me about OKC is that if they are having dry spells from three-point land with that defensive strategy, the Pacers are going to be off and running. It's over with. And the more that OKC misses, the more opportunities Indiana will have to do what they do best. Again, this isn't going to be like Denver, where when they were missing shots, you knew that they were going to run a post-up with Jokic or maybe a DHO with Jamal Murray or something like that, right? This isn't like Memphis, who didn't have any creators outside of Ja Morant and you could say Desmond Bane, a team that just struggled in the half court. Like, Indiana is going to take that missed shot and go the opposite direction. Like, thank you. Easy points. You know what I'm saying? That's what they want. So if I'm OKC, I'm keying in on two things. Number one, rebounding, especially the offensive boards, just like they showed versus the Timberwolves. And number two, the aggressiveness of Jalen Williams. We saw how both of these factors helped the Thunder go up 3-1 versus Minnesota in what was otherwise easily could have been a 2-2 tie. The reason OKC won in the end was because of the extra possessions they got throughout the game and the fact that Jalen Williams kept his foot on the neck all game long. Fortunately for them, Isaiah Hartenstein will have the rebound advantage versus Siakam, and Holmgren should be able to withstand Miles Turner, who is more of a stretch big, like I said earlier, and thus has never been a great rebounder. But wildly enough, though, I think the most important rebounder OKC may have to worry about is actually Tyrese Haliburton. Because similarly to Rajon Rondo and Russell Westbrook, Tyrese Haliburton seems to be at his best when the Pacers let him get the rebound and push the break. We saw that in Game 4 versus the Knicks. Tyrese was the team's highest rebounder with 12, tying Karl Anthony Towns for the most in the entire game. The next best rebounder on the Pacers was Pascal Siakam, who had 5. Everyone else had less than 4, even Miles Turner at 6'11". And they still beat the Knicks. OKC has shown that they have the hustle to win 50-50 balls and scrap for extra possessions. But in a series like this, it might have to be more about keeping the ball from Indiana as opposed to just getting extra opportunities to score points, if that makes sense. You almost got to play defense in that way, right? Like, you got to get the 50-50 balls even if you're not scoring. That's an extra possession that Indiana can't go off and run. So you got to take pride in those even more if you're OKC. Additionally, I think presuming Aaron Nesmith tackles the Shai matchup, just because he's a little bit bigger than Andrew Nembhard, Jalen Williams should have a size strength advantage on Nembhard or Haliburton. But even then, right? Like, let's say Nembhard wants to tackle that Shai matchup. Jalen Williams can probably hold his own versus Aaron Nesmith. That would be a fun matchup to watch because those guys aren't going to let up against each other. But let's say, they choose to put Nesmith on Shai. It's interesting for Indiana because, do you risk losing a key player to foul trouble by having Nembhard guard Shai instead of Nesmith? Like, this is what I'm anxious to see because it seems to be a no-win situation for the Pacers. Whoever guards Shai will have to be careful with their defensive aggression. Yet, if a smaller or weaker defender is on J-Dub, he will be able to channel that aggression we saw in the series versus Memphis and in the series versus Minnesota. Now, talent-wise, I think it's fair to say that Indiana's bench is better at scoring than OKC's bench. So, unless OKC is turning defense to offense, the non-Shai Gilgeous-Alexander minutes are going to be super important. We know OKC has the tendency to keep teams around once Shai goes to the bench. I've stressed this all year. The games where J-Dub is aggressive when Shai is on the bench are the games they tend to do well. But if he decides to go through the motions, this is where a team like the Indiana Pacers can use those minutes to pad a lead or even come back in a game, similar to what we've seen them do throughout the playoffs. I love the defensive versatility a team like OKC can bring in a series versus the Pacers, but I'll put it like this. With guys like Caruso, Dort, J-Dub, and Wallace, I anticipate instead of one OG Anunoby, it's going to be like 2 or 3 clones of him out there this time. The Pacers have to watch out for that. OG Anunoby was probably the best Knick who I would say in terms of who gave the most energy. OG Anunoby was the best Knick, I would say, games 4 through 6. And he was getting in the passing lanes. He was locking up. You know, I felt terrible for Aaron Nesmith because I'm like, dude, you just have no chance versus OG Anunoby. Like, you're not a guy that's a half-court operator. Like, he's going to stonewall you every time. And we saw a lot of possessions like that. So now imagine it's Lou Dort over here, Caruso over here, J-Dub over here, Cason Wallace as a point of attack. Like, there's no weak links there. So imagine what OKC can do with that. So again, I say, I love what Indy has been able to do this postseason, but they do not want the guys not named Haliburton or Siakam operating off the dribble versus the in-your-face defenders that OKC has. That, you know, they might get a little cup. I'm not saying they'll just be scoreless, but it's going to be trouble. I anticipate it being trouble. I'll even say this. To me, this should be OKC's easiest matchup since Memphis in terms of man-to-man defense. Yet, it will be their hardest test yet in terms of facing a team with elite ball movement and a team that's equally as good as them in transition. And as I wrap up this conversation with OKC, I want to finish on the topic of defense. Because where the Knicks messed up versus Indiana was when they tried to play the Pacers style in Game 4. Sure, they came back, they won Game 5. But then Game 6 was kind of a little bit of a mix, but especially Game 4. If you noticed, the best minutes they played were the times they stuck to their method of play. Y'all can play fast, but you ain't about to rush us. But it eventually got to the point where the Pacers were finding so much success playing fast, the Knicks decided to do the same. And in some ways, it did make sense as they were trying to score before the Pacers defense got set, right? But that up and down basketball was never the New York Knicks formula. And it's partially why they committed so many turnovers, because you're not playing your game. I've been saying it all playoffs, man. You do not beat the Indiana Pacers playing their game. And so many teams have succumbed to that. Remember, I'll even give you an example. Remember when we were kids and we took tests in school, and sometimes you could be cruising at your own pace. Oh, I studied. I was getting A's on the homework, a couple B's. I'm doing my thing. I'm ready for the test. I'm cruising, But suddenly, you see some of your classmates finishing faster than you. I mean, like, one by one, everybody's giving their paper to the teacher. 3 classmates turns to 6. 6 turns to 10. And you take a peek around the room, like, you realizing you're not finishing as fast. So then you start overthinking. Does this mean my answers are wrong? Did I skip a question on accident? Like, what if my classmates think I'm dumb because I'm taking longer to finish? Some kids might fold under that make-believe pressure and try to hurry up and finish instead of sticking to what got them there, right? In reality, the kids who finish fast are sometimes the same ones who got the worst grades. But you can get so caught up in what's going around you, you lose focus, right? And the secure kids are the ones who are like, look, I don't care if I got to come back at lunchtime to finish my test. Like, I'm going to take my time, stay with my momentum, and I'm going to make sure the answers are done to the best of my ability. And I give this example to say, if you follow me, the Knicks should have been the latter kid, right? It's just like the Warriors in their heyday. Everybody that tried to stay in games shooting hella threes embarrassed themselves. And remember, basketball is a teacher. Basketball is a teacher. So I hope you peep the life lesson in this. The teams that lost to the Warriors and now the Pacers succumbed to the wisdom of life. Run your race. What works for you ain't supposed to work for everybody because we're all unique. Everybody got a different path. Do what you do you, and stick to what works for you. Thankfully, I don't expect OKC to fall into that trap, but that is something that I'm going to be keying in on. Are they finally going to learn from these other Eastern Conference teams and say, nah, we're not falling for it? Now, speaking of sticking to what works, what defensive strategy may work against the Pacers, who seem impossible to keep up with? After all, the Pacers barely ran any sets in Game 4 versus the Knicks. So much of it was go, go, go. Whether made or missed shots, quick inbound, speed up the floor, get a bucket. Now, at first, I believe the Knicks, they didn't do the best job forming a wall on defense to prevent those transition looks. But what really happened is that they often struggled to sprint back on defense. And even if their defense was set, they gave Tyrese Haliburton too much space to come up the floor and gave him that freedom to orchestrate the offense in a clean manner. So that's were my thoughts initially. But after hearing Tim Legler's analysis on ESPN, I realized the Knicks' primary issue wasn't solely their wall-up defense, but more so their pressure on Tyrese Haliburton specifically. I presume the Knicks, they didn't want to guard him 94 feet because when picking up full court, you have to take that risk of the offensive player blowing by you for an easy layup or drive and kick opportunity. And that's exactly what you don't want to give the Pacers. But then I had a thought. Remember the 2019 Raptors vs. Bucks series, where the Raptors were able to come back down 2-0 to win the series thanks to the simple adjustment of Kawhi Leonard guarding Giannis Antetokounmpo? Kawhi, being one of the best on-ball defenders in NBA history, he chose to wall up Giannis, knowing that number one, he wasn't a great half-court scorer, and number two, he would be more reluctant to attack Kawhi one-on-one versus a weaker defender. Additionally, Kawhi made a similar adjustment in 2021 versus the Dallas Mavericks. He decided to guard Luka Doncic full court, knowing that he could tire out Luka since he already controlled so much of the Mavs offense. Right? This was yet another series that featured a Kawhi Leonard team coming back down from a 2-0 series deficit. So I'm sitting back and I'm thinking, what if OKC combined these two strategies versus the Pacers? Imagine Lou Dort guarding Tyrese 94 feet while the other players focus on getting back on defense. This way, Tyrese can't observe the floor as easily, and his teammates like Pascal Siakam, Obi Toppin, they can't leak out like 2007 Randy Moss. You know what I'm saying? Of course, all this is much easier said than done, and much easier after made baskets than misses, but it's certainly worth a try, especially when you factor in that Alex Caruso and Cason Wallace can do the same job. So it doesn't all fall on Lou Dort's shoulders. 3 fresh bodies are going to be able to guard one player 94 feet over the course of 48 minutes. That sounds like a nightmare to me. Because the best thing about guys like Alex Caruso, Cason Wallace, and Lou Dort is that they aren't asked to carry a heavy responsibility offensively. So when you can give them an assignment like this, and when they have an assignment like this, it becomes their sole focus. Oh, you mean it's my sole job to make sure Tyrese Haliburton takes 7 seconds to get the ball up to half court? That he has to turn his back around and he can't look forward and try to, be the floor general that he is? You mean to tell me that's the only thing I got to worry about is Tyrese Haliburton? Oh yeah. This is the Tony Allens, the Gary Paytons. Even though Gary Payton had a lot of responsibility as the point guard, but I think like as a defender, right? These all NBA defenders, this is what they do best. The best thing you can do is give them an assignment like this. An offensive player's worst nightmare is a defender that has made it their sole mission to stop them. The Knicks weren't able to do this as much because guys like Mikal Bridges and OG Anunoby still needed to produce offensively for the team. But for OKC, they legit have 3 players that can rotate this responsibility like a work shift. If I'm Dort, Caruso, and Cason Wallace, I'm treating this like MJ and Pippen taking turns guarding Tony Kukoc in the 92 Olympics. But even then, they haven't faced anybody in the playoffs that can pull from Steph Curry, Damian Lillard range until now, having to face Tyrese Haliburton. So OKC is going to have to be careful to move their pressure up versus Tyrese because of his ability to see the floor and the fact he can make deep threes. So those are my keys for OKC. Guard Tyrese 94 feet, wall up in transition, get back on defense, take care of the boards, most notably the offensive glass, get those 50-50 balls, empower J-Dub to be aggressive, and force the Pacers to embrace a half-court game. Now, most of these come on defense, so they shouldn't be too hard for the league's best defense. But as always, this is the Indiana Pacers, who have earned their ticket to the NBA Finals. And at the end of the day, I'm just a fan with a podcast, so it's up to the guys on the court and in the locker room to get it done. Like I always say, I never want to come up here like I'm the smartest and like I know it all. But these are just some of the things that I see in the series. Now it's time to go to the other side with the Indiana Pacers. Now, right off the bat, the Pacers need to take care of the basketball like it's their child. Because if OKC is forcing turnovers, it's trouble. Granted, Tyrese is great at running the show and protecting the pill, but we saw flashes of this versus New York and Cleveland. Especially New York, right? OG Anunoby, DeLon Wright. These are guys that were able to get into the passing lanes. And as great as the Pacers are offensively swinging the rock, great defenders know how to read one pass ahead, right? It's something that I learned in radio, right? Like, you're coached to, if you're reading a script, you read one line ahead so it sounds more natural. Defenses in the NBA do the same exact thing. If you can face a team that moves the ball a lot, if you can be one step ahead up here, you can read that pass and get a turnover. I saw OG Anunoby do that a lot versus the Pacers. And one thing about a team that likes to drive and kick, like I said, is that as a defender, you can time a lot of those passes, especially against a team that doesn't have a go-to shot creator to stop that ball movement. So if they like to swing, you can kind of read ahead of time. If you face a team enough, you're going to be able to jump on those passes. And, this is out of the Pacers' control, but they do have to watch out for this because the Thunder have very active hands. If you thought OG Anunoby was bad, like I said, just imagine 4 more on the court. So fewer pocket passes are going to be safe. Fewer of those Tyrese jump passes are going to be sure, right? The skip passes are going to be even more dangerous. So right off the bat, my first key for the Indiana Pacers is to take care of the basketball. Force the OKC role players to try to find a rhythm outside of transition opportunities. Because if I'm the Indiana Pacers, I don't want to see Alex Caruso, Kane Wallace, Lou Dort. I don't want to be chasing them for transition buckets. I want them to be so fed up that they're not getting those stops that they have to find a rhythm offensively in the half court, which they're not used to doing. All right, so secondly, I've referenced Game 4 versus the Knicks a lot this episode, and another thing that happened in this game was that Ben Mathurin managed to get 20 points in just 12 minutes of action. He was able to attack the basket, which I said in my last episode was going to be a great third option behind Siakam and Haliburton in the half court. The rim pressure of TJ McConnell and Ben Mathurin was going to be so imperative, and it paid off in that Game 4. The fact that he can come off the bench and have that kind of impact is what gives me faith in Indiana that they can hang versus the Thunder. That's what the Timberwolves were missing, right? Somebody outside of Ant and Randall to give some kind of aggressive scoring punch. The Pacers have that in Ben Mathurin and, like I said, TJ McConnell. Additionally, Mathurin's rim pressure led him to go 10 of 11 from the free throw line. So to score 20 points on like 8 shots, and he went 10 of 11 from the free throw line in just 12 minutes. Absolutely insane. And it does show just how impactful he can be when he's locked in on the game and not the antics, kind of like what we saw versus Cleveland. And that even reminds me too, believe it or not, another key of mine for the Indiana Pacers is the mental game. I've said it before, with all the challenges nowadays and not playing in an NBA that's physical all year long, too many players are complaining the second a call doesn't go their way. It happened versus the Timberwolves. It happened versus the Grizzlies. The minute these teams get in their feelings about OKC's physicality, that's when the leads go from 12 to 24 in the blink of an eye. OKC don't care about your feelings. They play ball. Check ball. The Pacers will be able to weather OKC storms better if they don't let their opponents see them sweat. Right, I kind of saw that versus the New York Knicks a few times. The Pacers and even the Cleveland Cavaliers, when they faced a stiffer defense on a particular game, they got a little in their feelings and it threw them off up here. And this was the exact thing that the Lakers had to learn in 2008, right? Most notably, Kevin Garnett, Kendrick Perkins, they took Pau Gasol's lunch money. You know, they were similar to OKC, KG, Perk, Leon Poe, Tony Allen. These dudes were dogs, man. And that team beat up the Lakers. That's why Kobe, Powell, Ariza, D. Fish, Lamar Odom and company, they came back a year later more mentally tough, which made them more physically tough. You saw the difference in Pau Gasol in 09 compared to 08. You saw how Kobe looked a little extra locked in. No, he was not smiling. I don't think Kobe Bryant and Pau Gasol smiled all of 2009. Like, the beast that we saw Kobe and Powell become in 2009 was because they got their butt kicked in 2008. The best thing about the Pacers is that they rarely believe they are out of games. And that energy is going to have to come in handy in a series versus this relentless OKC team. Even in the midst of not getting calls and things of that nature, you got to believe that you can still win, because that's what got you here. So the Pacers got to really be locked in up here, because so many teams lose against the OKC Thunder because they get in their feelings about the fouls. Now, additionally, I think Pascal Siakam should go all out this series. He's done an excellent job playing within the offense, making an impact on multiple areas of the game. But I kind of see him the same way I see J-Dub for OKC. An aggressive Pascal Siakam is my favorite one to watch. He is the best version. Game 2 and Game 4 Siakam, and Game 6 Siakam versus the Knicks is the version I like to see. Especially when OKC goes small, he's got to take advantage because he'll likely have Hartenstein on him. So with Hartenstein, he may be able to get that jumper going because he won't be able to be as aggressive going to the basket. And when they go small, he can attack the paint. I look for him to supplement his buckets in that way, right? Or maybe vice versa. Maybe you want to attack Hartenstein and get him in foul trouble. Now they go small and you can get the post fade going, right? So he can mix it up, but that's just how I see it. I would like for him to not be a guy that goes through the motions. The Pacers always look more dangerous when he hits first offensively because he is their half-court guy. How Jokic has Jamal Murray, you know, even Shai, you could say, having J-Dub. I'm trying to think of other examples. Even, you know, Giannis having Dame, right? That's what Pascal Siakam is for this Pacers team. He, even though it's a different version, he is that guy that they need to look at to get a bucket when they need it the most. So his aggression is everything to me. You know, and even then, I would even say the same for Tyrese Haliburton. I've said it before. The league is lucky that Tyrese Haliburton is more of a floor general because he's actually a cold scorer too. I've been watching him this playoffs like, dude, you should be shooting more. And there are going to be moments where Indy needs his buckets. So again, as great of a floor general as he is, I would like to see him balance both scoring and playmaking the ways he did in Game 1 and Game 4 versus the Knicks, because that's imperative for him. He's such a cold scorer. They're gonna need that at times. You know, especially versus the OKC defense. You know, you can't always rely on them role players. Tyree's gonna have to get a bucket. And last but certainly not the least, the Pacers have to stay out of foul trouble. And going into a series versus a guy like Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, who can often get to the free throw line whenever he wants, that's going to be a lot easier said than done. Out of the 4 conference finals teams, they committed the most fouls with 25, which is more than the 23 they've committed in the playoffs overall, which is also the most among the 16 teams that were involved this year. So playing defense without fouling is definitely not a strength for this team. And again, we saw that versus the Knicks. The Pacers don't really have those big wings. So guys like Nembhard, Nesmith, McConnell, Mathurin, he's a little bit bigger, but like a lot of these guys try to get in a low stance and play physical because they lack in height. And I love it and I respect it, but it's not going to go well versus a team like OKC because when you're playing that physical defense, you risk playing over aggressive. The Cavs saw early leads versus the Pacers a few times because Tyrese got 2 quick fouls. Best believe OKC will try to do the same. So in summary, Indy has to protect the pill. Ben Mathurin has to be the X factor, specifically with his ability to get to the rim. They have to stay level-headed and withstand OKC's physicality. Both Pascal Siakam and Tyrese Haliburton will have to go to work scoring the basketball a little bit more often than they usually do. And they absolutely have to watch the fouls. So with all that said, who do I think is going to win this series? I could probably organize 5 different versions of this episode trying to give different insights. I went through so many ideas in my head of how this episode could go. But at the end of the day, what matters is what happens on the hardwood. So before I wrap it up here, I have to give you my finals prediction. Now, before the season, I said Celtics over Thunder in 6. I felt like OKC was going to have to endure their finals defeat before they won, like most great teams do. But now they are the favorite, and I'm right with them. I want to say Thunder in 6 because I believe the Pacers are definitely good enough to get at least 2 games. But I think best case, if you're the OKC Thunder, I would go as far as saying Thunder in 5. There's going to be at least one game OKC gets outplayed. It's happened at least once in every series they've played in. But I think OKC's defense, paired with the shot making of Shai Gilgeous-Alexander and potentially Jalen Williams, may be too much for the Pacers to handle. I think at absolute best, it's OKC in 5. The Thunder don't present the same defensive weaknesses as the Knicks, for example. With the way Tyrese Haliburton was able to expose guys like Cat in drop coverage and Brunson with the fouls, I don't think it's going to be the same thing with OKC. Because, this is my thing. Mismatch hunting, it doesn't bother me too much in today's NBA because I don't see it that much different than watching Shaq repeatedly get the ball down low versus a guy like Matt Geiger, right? Or Allen Iverson get the Iverson cut over and over and over again versus slower guard or forward even. Basketball has always been about attacking weaknesses. But what does bother me about mismatch hunting is that when guys mismatch hunt because they're ducking their one-on-one matchup. If you rock with this podcast, you're probably like me and come from that 2010s, 2000s NBA. And those stars learned from the 90s and the 80s stars that it comes a point where you can't duck your matchup. You have to be willing to go one-on-one. Admittedly, I lose a little hoop respect for a player that needs a pick to save them every time. It's just like D-Rose said on Out the Mud. It ain't a matchup if you ducking your assignment. And OKC's got the kind of defense where if you keep running pick and rolls, fishing for the weak link, it's not going to happen. You're going to get attached to another guy that can defend. So you're going to have to pick your poison. If you want to mismatch hunt, it's not going to work with OKC. And on top of that, OKC has shown time and time again that they can get buckets and will themselves to victory even in the ugly games they should have lost. Before Game 6 versus the Knicks, that was my fear with the Pacers. When it gets ugly, can they still find a way to win? And I'm not talking about some miraculous comeback, right? I'm not talking about, crazy, coming down from 7 with 15 seconds left. I'm not talking about Aaron Nesmith knocking down 6 straight threes. Right? I'm not talking about when they're just the beneficiary of a team that got cold from shooting. I'm talking about when the game seems to be at a stalemate and either team can win. Can the Pacers find a way to win even if it means demanding your 2 best players, Tyrese Haliburton and Pascal Siakam, go to work offensively? I just think the Thunder are better in those moments than the Pacers. I'm not saying the Pacers are bad at that. I thought their Game 6 versus the Knicks showed a lot of grit. How even if the game isn't all at their pace all 48 minutes, they can still win. I like that there have been a few moments where they showed that transition isn't the whole story with them. Pascal Siakam single-handedly led them to that Game 2 win versus the Knicks. He set the tone. I was very impressed. But compared to what OKC has with Shai, J-Dub, and Chet, they don't have as much to work with as far as guys who really got that instinct to just hoop when it matters the most. There were some possessions, like I said earlier, there was Nesmith trying to muscle his way to the rim, as a last resort. TJ McConnell running into walls at times. Nembhard struggling to find space to create off the dribble, and it kind of disrupted his rhythm. A lot of that made me cringe to the point where I was like, if Indy can't score in the half court versus the Knicks, imagine what this could look like versus the Thunder. So I'll be nice and I'll say Thunder in 6 because, like I said, the Pacers are a really great team. But the Pacers will definitely, give them a hard battle because OKC has their share of role players also that aren't great one-on-one offensive players either. So that's what I'm watching. It'll be an extremely competitive game and series, and I think a bit more balanced series than some are expecting. But my final pick is OKC Thunder 4-2 versus the Indiana Pacers. So with all that said, we've made it to the end of a special finals edition Hip to the Games episode. From impact players, strengths, weaknesses, matchups, strategies, and predictions, I hope you enjoyed my version of an NBA Finals preview. But as always, I've done enough talking. It's time to hear from you. What strategies do you see working best? Who might experience a rough series? Who are the X factors? How can Rick Carlisle and Mark Daigneault lead their teams to victory? Who you got winning the series? As always, keep it respectful. I am with the foolery. But you can tweet the show at Hip to the Games or tag me directly on Twitter and IG at Desmond Powell _ to share your thoughts on all the topics discussed today, as I would love to hear or read your thoughts. Keep them coming. Like I said, it's the finals, so I want to hear all of it. And even some things that I missed, you know. And at the end of the day, I just want to say thank you for listening to another episode of H2DG. There's a lot of podcasts going on with the playoffs and the NBA Finals. So if you listen to me, man, I appreciate that wholeheartedly. And thank you for listening for another episode, all for the love of the best combo there is. And of course, here's a huge shout out to you for being hip to the games. Peace out and God bless. Hope you enjoyed this episode of Hip to the Games, and if you enjoyed this episode, be sure to hit up the socials at Desmond Powell _ and at Hip to the Games on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok so you don't miss out on the fun. And please follow or subscribe to the show and leave a review on the podcast platform you're on right now, as your support is greatly appreciated.